Hey everyone, today we have the pleasure of learning about James Browning, an incredible broadcaster, photographer, pilot, hypnotherapist, and so many more things that you've done throughout your life. And today we're going to dive into your life story so we can hopefully cultivate some wisdom, gain some perspectivity, and become better people.
Okay.
So to get started, we're going to dive into your life, and I know because I'm in your house and I've seen all of the amazing pictures that you've taken, I know you love photography, and I wanted to start by asking you, what is the first picture that you remember taking, and what was that like?
I'm not sure of the first picture. The first camera was a little Olympus half frame 35 millimeter, which means you get double the number. You know, if it's 24, you get 48 pictures. And I took photographs for a junior high school yearbook. And so I'm walking around with my camera taking pictures of people constantly. And that's what I remember. And I don't have many of those, but the ones I have today are cherished. Sent a few to old friends and stuff, and they're pictures they haven't seen, that I never showed them back then. And they were 12, 14 years old. So I remember the genre. I don't remember the photograph. I don't.
Wow, that's fantastic. The only time that I was a photographer was for yearbook. I took pictures at sporting events occasionally for yearbook, and I'm not a photographer at all, but I did learn put their face in the middle of what is the rule of thirds?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the rule?
Law of thirds, whatever
Law
it's
of
called.
thirds.
Two things, yeah.
I learned enough to maybe take a okay photo here and there. So I can appreciate that. So thinking about that, you've got that yearbook. When you think about other memories though, like in childhood, maybe self-defining memories in the first chapter of your life. Obviously, we can't remember everything at the very beginning,
No.
but
I did not have a fun childhood.
Mm.
It was peaceful till I was about 7, and I was born. My parents were 18 and 19, children having children. And as I look back now, they weren't faithful to each other. They were running around. My dad got another woman pregnant at 7. He leaves. My mother's proud, tells him to take a flying leap, won't take his money, which means I lived in abject poverty. And, she goes wild. She's drinking and screwing and whatever. My brother and I are kind of like feral kids. Thank goodness my grandparents looked after us. And then she married the stepfather from hell when I was 10. So my childhood was not lots of fun. I mean, school was my respite. I liked school. I did well in school. I was an honor student. I won science projects. So there I was somebody. But at home, I was not. I was just baggage. I just was somebody who came along. So that's childhood for me. But thank God for school. I don't know if I'd hated school too. I don't know what would have happened to me.
Wow. At that time, so you mentioned you had a brother too, is that what you said?
Yeah, 2 years younger.
Did you feel any sense of camaraderie with your brother through this
Oh, we're
time?
very close, still are to this day. I'm the oldest, and I fight back, always did. He would like a pup that's been hit too much, he would just kind of fold. And so I was always in a position of trying to protect him all the time we were growing up.
Wow. In all of those moments, it's clear from what you're saying to me, like, I know you could probably go through moment after moment of what was really difficult for you there. And you mentioned school as a bright spot.
Mm-hmm. Teachers that noticed me, encouraged me. It wasn't just school. It was a few teachers, there's 3, that are very dear to me. I mean, I don't have my watch on right now, but you probably noticed I wear it upside down. A lot of people assume that's from flying because pilots in the old days, you had to figure ground speed and you used your watch, it's on here. And so, but no, it was Mr. Farr, my 6th grade teacher. He wore his upside down and I loved him. And so I still to this day, all these years later, 60 so years later, I still wear my watch, what most people would think upside down. So there was the lady who in my family wasn't interested in the science projects, and I won regional science fairs. My family wasn't interested. This lady, my science teacher, drove me 50 miles to a junior college, got me checked in, made sure I was okay. I stayed overnight in a dorm and came back and got me the next day. She came back for the award ceremony when I won. Nobody else was interested. So teachers, someone who looked and said, you know, I think I see the spark here. And I ran into that a number of other times in my life. I had a mentor when I was, well, I went to work for him when I was 23 and left when I was 30 because I knew he was leaving. And I walked into his office my last day. He said, kid, I want to walk you out. And I said, how do I repay you for what you've done for me? I mean, you've believed in me. I'm a hippie, long hair. You don't understand what we're doing. You never did, but you trusted me. How do I repay that? And he looked at me. I still get a little emotional when I think about this. He said, kid, don't you understand it? Don't you understand it yet? I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, look, I saw the spark in you and I took the chance. He said, I was an alcoholic and someone took a chance on me and I got straight and sober and I've been your boss for a long time. He said, when you see the spark, when you see it, you'll know it. He said, you take the chance. And so that's what those teachers did. That's what I had bosses that did, is they encouraged me. I'm 18 years old. There's a guy named Bill Tanner. Saw him 25 years later and he didn't even remember it. He remembered me and he encouraged me. He said, you have real talent for this business, for broadcasting. You should stick with it. You should make it a career. And I, 25 years later, ran into him at a convention and thanked him. He said, I don't remember saying that. And I've had that happen to me since, where I said something that I guess they said I did, that I don't recall, that someone found that to be a benchmark in their life. So, you know, if I go back to school, it's people. You know, if you don't, take the time. Just take the time. If you see the spark, take the time. You won't always be right. Sometimes the person will so disappoint you, you'll regret it. But most of the time you won't. Not if it's a real spark. And that's what it is. It's a spark. I can spot it. It's a spark. It's in their eyes. It's in their manner. You know that if they lack talent, they will not, maybe they have, 10 measures of talent, but they'll have 30 measures of determination. And those people will always win. It's not talent. An unsuccessful, talented person's the most common thing in the world. Never did anything with it. A person who has a talent to be a world-class concert pianist but won't practice. That's so common. It's people who have the determination and moderate talent end up succeeding a lot bigger most of the time, at least in my experience.
I want to take what you just said. I think that's really powerful. I resonate deeply with that because I feel the same way. We've talked before this, and people in my community, they know that I lost both my parents before I was out of high school. What I don't know if I've talked about on here is how it was my teachers too, who poured into me and cared for me and gave me purpose. And importantly, they were people that I actually wanted to be like. Even if my parents did give me that. My mom passed before I was old enough to think about it, but I didn't want to be like my dad. So if he did give me praise, it wouldn't even work. It has to be someone you admire who gives you praise. And I was picking that up from the way you're talking about these people. You saw something in them that you really appreciated, you genuinely wanted to be like. And then that allowed it to open up. If there wasn't some redeeming, admirable quality about these people, it'd be impossible for that to happen. But one thing I remember is when I was in second grade, my best friend, he lived in a trailer park. And I don't even know if he was living in the trailer park yet. I think he just moved there. And I had a teacher who told me in second grade not to be friends with him or any of my other friends because they were bad kids. They were from the bad place. And this teacher was trying to protect me. And that was completely unfair. And I told her no. I denied that. I thought that was ridiculous. That's crazy. My friend had been there for me and cared for me, and I would not do that. But I do have to say that a lot of my friends who did not, similar home lives, but did not have teachers pouring into them or teachers giving them, love and appreciation and self-esteem, it did not go nearly as well for them. They didn't like school. Did you have any friends like that? That were in similar circumstances but didn't get the love?
But I was one of those kids. I'm in high school. And the girls liked me fine, but because of my mother, alcoholic, one of the town sluts, and my stepfather, the resident lunatic in town, I couldn't show up at their house, take people's daughters out. Couldn't. There were people I saw, on the sly, because it was the only way, as long as their parents didn't know. So I was one of those people.
That's exactly how I felt too in my life, and I had those similar experiences. Did you have any friends in that same situation that didn't like school, that didn't have an outlet?
Sure. I mean, the one that comes to mind, his name was Metters Cleveland Halpin. We knew him as Buddy. And Buddy was a big old boy. And he kind of had nappy hair. I mean, he was Caucasian, and so people gave him crap about being big. People gave him crap about his hair. He'd been held back a year or so, I think 2 years actually. And he was the guy I did guy things with. We were in Boy Scouts. First person I went over 120 miles an hour with in a car was his mother's LTD, listening to In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida Live, sailing down the road. He had an old Ford Fairlane that was his car, and the gas tank was rusted out, so he had a 5-gallon gas can sitting in the middle of a spare tire in his trunk. So that's as far as he could go, was 5 gallons. It was a fire trap. I never realized that at the time. But Buddy died in a boating accident with another friend of mine when I was 19. When I got crosshairs with my stepfather, I lived with him and his family for about 5 weeks. They took me in, made sure I had lunch money, made sure my clothes were washed, took care of me like I was one of theirs. And Buddy had good parents. He was just, not the brightest bulb in the pack. But he was dear to me. I mean, I still think about him sometimes and well up and wish he was around. I mean, we did guy stuff together. The real stuff, Yeah. Learned a lot from him too. He was a couple of years older than me because of being held back. I mean, I'm 14. He's got a driver's license, so it's cool stuff.
Wow. When you're saying that, one thing that popped into my mind is one thing that growing up in America I've experienced is a lot of people tend to have a best friend, somebody who they have that kind of connection with.
Mm-hmm.
And I've now got to know a lot of people from other cultures where they have tons of friends. They don't really have a best friend. They have like 50 cousins who, in Latin America, and you've traveled the world. You probably met plenty of people who have this kind of background. What do you think, now this is just a question to ponder, what do you think it means in the American story to have that best friend? Is it an essential part of the story? Is that American?
It could be. I don't know. I mean, for me, it's all about trust. The way I grew up, I didn't trust many people. Mm-hmm. There weren't people that had my best interest at heart. Teachers, but that's different. My own age. Got picked on some at school. It was about trust. I got picked on a little bit because I'm a, nerd brainiac. And there was another guy, Herbert Seymour. We played, years before, through into junior high, we played trumpet. Well, he's a big guy. He goes and plays tackle for the football team. He caught some of them one day between the buses messing with me. He stepped in and he said, "Gentlemen, if you ever touch him again, I will come looking for you." They never did again.
Wow.
Lost part of a leg in Vietnam.
Wow.
Herbert did. But he came home. None of my friends died there, but he's the only one that got messed up.
Have you ever been in the military?
No. I'm a long-haired hippie freak from the late 60s and 70s. If they had tried to draft me, I would have gone to Canada, I assure you. I have great respect for the people who went. The friends I know who went, they thought they were drafted, thought they had to do it. The guys who were older who went came back and said, "Run, do not go over there. Do not. It's corrupt. The upper echelon's stealing everything. They'll send you to take the same hill 4 or 5 times. People get killed. It's bad." And so I would have gone to Canada. I would not have gone. I would not have.
That's wild. Tell me more about your teen years. So that's where you kind of start developing deep into who you are as a teenager. You start really thinking, who am I? What's the life I want to live? What were your teen years like?
So on the radio by the time I was 15. First, there's a little country station in my hometown. I won't get into the story how I ended up there. I never aspired to it. I knew a guy who worked out there. I was in marching band with him. And he just said, I'll talk to the boss and, maybe get you a job out here. I was going to go be a physicist. I didn't give that any seriousness. And called me out there. The guy said, if you'll let David teach you, I can't pay you to learn, but if you learn, you can have his job when he leaves, part-time job. So 15 years old, I fell into that. And it's country. Well, I'm going to play rock and roll. So within less than a year, I'm driving my little Volkswagen Beetle, my first car, 40 miles, to WRFS FM in Alexander City, Alabama. And it was one of 2 radio stations, top 40 stations you could pick up. I was the night announcer. So I ended up, I'm 16 years old. I make enough money to pay all my own bills. I slept at home. I ate there some, but mostly took care of myself, which really pissed my stepfather off because he didn't have control over me. And I worked 5 and 6 nights a week. So even though people knew who I was, I couldn't get a date because, I'm working. So that did my ego, not feeling good enough and not feeling like enough. That did me a lot of good. Is suddenly I had worth. And though my father had been long gone, he came back around in my later teens. We established something of a relationship for a few years. And he was very proud of the fact that I did that. But he was also a country singer in the Deep South, had a couple of singles and such. And so, his son being on the radio, that was cool stuff. So that's what it was. I fell into something. I didn't aspire to it. I fell into a career that I did for almost 40 years.
Wow.
Fell into it. I think it's, there are so many things happen in my life that are just, you can call it whatever you want. I mean, I'm not a traditional believer in religions, but you can call it grace or whatever. Things happened. And I don't think it's anything magical. I think the opportunities come if you're paying attention. I think they're there. I think they'll walk right in front of you. Most people miss them. And I was desperate. Any opportunity that came, I took advantage of it. So, I don't know, go to live with my dad. I'm on a progressive rock station in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm the night announcer there. Now, that was cool. You played whatever you want. You could pick the station up in 5 states. I couldn't drive home to Alabama and stop at a service station. That's back when they pumped it for you. And I'd speak and the guy would know who I was. And it's like, I didn't make hardly anything, but, and plus the records were coming in left and right. Well, we had to pick out our own stuff, so I had to listen to it all. And so that's really what cultivated that deep appreciation of music that I have.
Wow.
So I lucked out. I mean, I don't know. My whole life has been like that, though. I mean, it's not grace. It's not blessing. They're just, the stuff has walked in front of me, and I've reached for it.
Wow.
See, I think at a deep level, at least for me, I don't know if it's true of everybody, but I think we know. Deep down, we know. Your gut, your intuition, that subconscious feeling where all your emotions and all your life experiences and all your memories are. If you'll pay attention, you'll get these little nudges, little taps on the shoulder. They're very easy to walk right through and pay no attention to. But maybe I was desperate enough that I paid attention to them. So when I got the nudges all through my life, I can go backwards. Hypnotherapist, it was a nudge. I just knew I need to go do this. Learn to fly, it was just something I needed to do. The photography, something I needed to do. Just a need down inside. I felt it. And I followed through on it. Now, I don't know if it's unique to me. No idea. I'm eternally grateful and glad for whatever it is.
Well, I'll tell you, I think that's amazing. And I've had that nudge to be a rapper since I was in 4th grade.
Well,
and it's funny that you say that because I don't know whether I'm a psychologist. And so I often wonder, is this something that was planted there? Is it that you just had the right nurturing experiences so certain things feel right? And I don't know what it is, but I know what you mean. And it actually feels like when you ignore it, when you recognize it and you actually connect to it, but then ignore it, sometimes it feels like you've ignored a part of yourself.
I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
I mean, I raised myself. My brother and I have talked a lot about that. We figured life out like a pinball in the pinball machine. We just bounced off the bumpers until it made sense. Made lots of mistakes. And I did. I'm 18 years old, get my car repossessed because, I'm spending money on girls instead of making my car payments. I mean, you learn things that I made a lot of mistakes, but screw it all up.
Speaking of girls, did you have a childhood crush or love that persisted for a while?
Oh, yeah.
Anybody notable?
Oh, yeah.
What was
Not
that?
notable. No, it was in my school.
Ooh, what was that
Fourth
like?
grade, man. I carried a torch for Angela Poland from the time I was in the fourth grade all the way until I moved away in the 11th. But I didn't have a chance. See, I'm like, you know my story. She's like the Miss Everything. She's cheerleader, prom queen, beautiful, mother's a school teacher at the school. I mean, I didn't have a chance.
It's funny you say that because I dated Miss Everything in middle school for 3 days, and I was in the same boat. She came, oh gosh, if you're listening to this, you know who you are. Wow. But she was exactly that. And she came to my little part of Ohio. I had a little village, and it was a really small part, but we all went to a bigger school.
Mm-hmm.
Not a huge school, but out of that town. And she came because her friend lived there, and we hung out over a weekend, and we had a deep, meaningful conversation. And I was the kid on the wrong side of the tracks. I was going to school with literally, like, if you know rap music, G Unit.
Mm-hmm.
I had Tupac on my jeans, and I'm in rural Ohio, but that's what I was connected to. That's because it was different, and I wasn't like anybody in my town, I felt like, so that was it. And we dated for 3 days, but when she got back to school, people put a lot of pressure on her. What are you dating him for? Why are you dating him? And the truth is we had a meaningful connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I tasted that for 3 days, and I resonated deeply with what you said, which was that there is some level of truth that where you're positioned in life creates so much social pressure. It's very hard to break that. But that weekend where we broke free and it was like we were free of all that crap, that to me was presence. That was life. That was bliss. That was real. And that's something I think, to me, is the American dream, actually. That you break, I think that's not often actualized, but that you break free of that. It's interesting. So, thinking about your love, if you had to title your teens, like if it was a book we're writing, and you had to title your teens, what comes to mind? What would you title it?
First thing that popped into mind is a song title, The Long and Winding Road. All the curves and the turns and the hills, just the long and winding road.
Wow. So as you take the long, winding road into your 20s, young adulthood, what was that like? What was like the defining moment? Not just leaving high school, but what was the defining moment where you switched into adulthood?
I was so lucky. I mean, I fell into broadcasting. My roommate is getting married. I'm 18 years old, almost 19. He's a few years older. He's moving to Colorado. He talked me into quitting my job and going with him, which I resisted, and I finally gave in. I had no job. I get there and have a job within 3 days. They never made a go of it. They came back after 6 months. I stayed. I'm on the radio there. I worked my way from overnights. I'm 3 years later, 2.5. I'm the morning guy and the program director. I get shopped from a station in Omaha, Nebraska. I get a call out of nowhere wanting to talk to me about coming to work for them. And 8 months later, they laid a bunch of people off. I think it were like 7 of us the same day. And 3 weeks later, I'm doing mornings at M105 in Cleveland. It was a top 10 market then. Album rock station, big deal back in those days. Then I didn't want to be on the air anymore. And I'm 22, 23 years old. I wanted to be a program director. And the guy that told me, don't you get it yet, kid? I went to work for him. And I flew down from Cleveland to Dayton. And he's giving me, we've spent a nice 2 hours in the morning and had a lunch. And he's giving me, we're going to talk to some other people. And he's doing all that. And I turned around. He said, we've called you a cab. And I turned around and looked at him. I said, look, you can find somebody who has more experience than me, but you won't find anyone who wants this job more than me or anyone who will work harder than me. He hired me on the spot. Within 2 years, we had the highest rated album rock station in America. Lucky. I was just in the right place at the right time. The University of Dayton in those days had a radio station on the air, 50,000 watt station, WVUD. It had been the dominant one until this one came along. But it was a great training facility. People came from Chicago and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh because they could be on the air. They got paid minimum wage, had a 3-hour shift. And if you went home for the summer, you lost your gig. Well, there are people big names that some of you would know, that came there. Well, I just picked them off. I picked off the best and hired them. And I'm little, in time, I'm the oldest. And they're all younger, but they built a career for me. Just hiring talent. It's the same thing, hiring talented people and trying to keep them, a pound of pot changed hands at my radio station and someone ratted him out. And I talked my boss into not firing the guy, protected him. I was fiercely protective of my people. And they were very loyal to me. And we built a radio station that was incredible. It's WTUE in Dayton, Ohio. It's still there, still highly rated to this day. That was the beginning. And so my boss is leaving, so I'm going to leave. So what do I leave? I leave the highest rated to go to the second highest rated, which is KZAP, KZAP in Sacramento. It was busted. They wanted it fixed, so I went to do that. And I was lucky. I had people come after me. I had people trying to hire me till I just wish they would leave me alone. Just leave me alone. Because I worked for a guy, he knew. One time I didn't go to New York. I didn't want to live in New York. And he tore me down. He said, you always go talk. You can always say no. And that's one of the reasons I stayed with him for so long, is because he wasn't trying to hold on to me. He wanted the best for me. But I stayed loyal to him.
When you say that, so this person wanted the best for you, mm-hmm. How do you discern that? Like, throughout your life, how have you come to discern when people want the best for you versus when they have a different agenda?
He pushed. Okay, I'll tell you a quick story. This is the truth. Now, you understand, we're still using typewriters, folks. Okay, there's no such thing. I mean, in 1980, I got him to buy the very first computer that ever came in the place. We're back in the 70s. And finally get a budget. The station's taking off. I get $25,000 to market the station with. And he wants me to come up with a plan. So I put one together, and it came back with a note. I can't remember if it was, which came first. Is this the best you can do, or you can do better than this? But it came back, and I retyped it, made it better. It came back again. I'm pissed. I've sent it to him twice. I have made corrections. There aren't many, not many, there were typos, but not too many typos. And so finally, I get it all done. It's like a Monday. I've worked on it all weekend. I go into his office. I'm a little pissed off, and I said, here, this is the third time, and this is right. You know what he looked at me and said? He said, okay, kid, I'll read it this time. And what I learned, because he proceeded to tell me, he said, you fly too fast. You don't finish things. You don't think it all the way through sometimes, and it's important that you do. It's important that you do something a second or third time when you write it to make sure you've got it right. I never forgot it. His name's Don Kidwell. I mean, he's been gone for a long time. But he did things like that. I mean, when the pot changed hands in the radio station, very theatrical, he had me call a conference meeting in the conference room a couple of days later. He put posters up at the station all the way around and stuff. And he comes in and he's telling everybody hello. And then he proceeds to start walking around the room, ripping that stuff off the wall. And he's pissed. And he's telling us, you guys have built this and you're going to destroy it like this. He got up on the table and walked back and forth, lecturing everybody. And then we heard him laugh as he walked down the hall. It was a show. He was just trying to scare us a little bit. You know, he didn't want his radio station to be the place where a pound of pot changed hands, so he didn't want that crap going on anymore.
Wow. And for context, a pound of pot changing hands at this time, not good.
Not in a radio station, because you don't own the license. You're a trustee of the federal government. You're a trustee of the license. The license could have been pulled. I mean, all sorts of stuff. But I protected my guy, and he protected me.
Wow. That's powerful. And I think I could imagine people listening to this and just kind of just being blown away from the idea of thinking, even the thing that you just said, that you got it back and he didn't even read it. I'm in graduate school, and I can tell you right now that if an advisor did that exact same thing in graduate school to a student, it would be scandalous. Or at least from my experience, it would be scandalous. But I've had people like that in my life mentor me. And those people absolutely made me the best. They are the reason that I'm even anywhere close to as good as I am, and I've got a long way to go. But it was because they did say things like that, and they did push me to do exactly the same thing, to keep going. Don't just stop. Like, oh, you rode your initial motivation, and now you think you got something done with your initial motivation. And it might have a seed of goodness, but you haven't learned how to cultivate the seed yet.
Yeah, I see. I know what you're saying. Well, and 10 years later, I'm vice president, general manager of a large radio operation. And who's calling me for advice? My old mentor.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What was that like when he calls you and says...
Well, we had stayed in touch the whole time. And he would say, well, you've done really well with this. How did you handle this? Or how did you do that? Or how did you figure this out? And I would just tell him. I had several people. First time I did a homegrown album where you have local talent and you create, now it was albums and CDs and things like that. I just called a friend in Cincinnati who I knew had done it and said, how the hell do you do this? And he said, just take a trip down here, spend a half a day with me. Our lawyers have already done all the forms. You can take them home and just retype them, put your name on it here. And he just told me how. I mean, I have had one after another of people just because I asked. I showed up and said, I don't have a clue how to do this. Will you help me? Most did.
Wow. In a country where I think a lot of people feel like they need some help, it might be great advice, honestly. What do you think you had to do or be so that when you asked that question, those people really wanted to help you?
I don't know. Honest? Saying you need help, that's one of the most honest things you can ever say to anyone. And I would do the same thing for them and did when I was asked. I don't know. You'd have to ask them. Honestly, I don't know. I mean, they were usually people I looked up to in some shape or form. You know, it was kind of the younger, the pup who's wanting to learn from the guys who really know. And so I'd ask for help.
So you're riding like an amazing ride with this broadcasting career and then directing career. I mean, like program directing career. This is wild. Did you ever face any, like, there can be a rush to that and a rush to success? Did that rush to success ever, come with any challenges or like...
Sure.
Oh yeah, would you mind explaining that?
When I first became a general manager, you have the power. There's nobody in the place that has your power. I mean, you talk about the pecking order. I can peck anybody at will, any way I want, anytime I want. And as long as I don't get too far out of line, no one's going to have anything to say about it. I pecked too much too often. I had to learn. I had to learn to wield that power a little better. Not because at that point I had it all. I mean, sales department, everybody on air, engineers, everybody. And I had to learn to lead and not manage, and they're very different things. Yeah, that was my probably late 30s. That's where that all happened.
Wow, if you could go back, did you ever were there ever any examples or things that happened where you were doing that managing and it caused pain or just screwed something up that made you realize I have to shift, I have to become a leader more than a manager?
Usually in retrospect, I said too much. I went too far. I got too excited. I don't know. I may have broken a person or two along the way because I demanded a lot. I always demanded a lot of myself. And I don't care what business it is. I mean, in a radio station, I always likened it. I'm not much of a sports fan, but I liken it to sports. If I have a football team on the field, I will try to teach you. I will try to help you to play the position. But there comes a point, either you can or you can't. We don't have a B team, so everybody plays. If you can't play, and for whatever reason it is, don't have the talent, you're distracted, you're going through a divorce, whatever it is, I'll give you some time. But if you don't get it together, I'm sorry. You can't play with us. We're playing at a top professional level. You've got to be able to perform like that. I'll cut you slack for a while, but you're not going to get more than 6 months. If you can't get it back between the ditches, you need to go somewhere else and figure out what you need to do with your life.
Wow.
So I only play with pros. All the way through, I insisted that you got to have talent and you got to be professional. When someone new, even as a manager, would come on board, I talked to everyone for about 20, 25 minutes. And I said, there's just a few things you're going to have. First off, we believe you're talented. That's why we hired you. If you fooled us, we'll find you out. Second is you're going to have to tell the truth. If we find you lying enough, you won't be here. And the third is we believe in basic human dignity here, which means you're going to treat people decent. If you lose it with somebody, you get excited in the halls, you get behind closed doors as fast as you can. You go in there and scream and yell at each other behind closed doors all you want, but you're not going to do it in front of other people here. And if I catch you doing it, and then I'll call the two of you in my office, and I'll referee while you guys get said what you need to get said until you're calm and peaceful again, because we don't put up with that. So that was it. If you've got those three things, you're going to do great with us. You got to have talent. That's the very first thing. You got to be honest, and you got to treat people that you're working with decent. That's the magic.
Wow, that is so, when you're saying that, that is so powerfully true, but also so hard for me to hear. And recently I had somebody, a mentor in my life, at this current stage of my life, say that I had this unique talent, a talent that not a lot of people have, that is unbelievably useful and powerful and would allow me to impact the world in a powerful, amazing way, a good way, helping people. And while they were telling me that, it broke my heart. It absolutely shattered.
Why? I'm curious. Why?
Because I don't want to believe that it's about talent. When I hear that, what I hear is that you have something that you were either born with or you weren't. And I reject that so fundamentally, because I genuinely believe that if you will, it's like what you said earlier, that if you're determined, it's like if you're determined and you really will give it all you got, that's what I'm addicted to. That's the story I love.
Look, that's great stuff. But I mean, I can take you and show you performances of musicians that I've seen and people I've seen play. And you go, oh my goodness, how in the world can a human being do that? It's talent. I mean, there's talent involved in it. You got to have the other. I mean, there's nothing more common than talent that never turns into anything. But you got to have talent to get out on the field. I mean, there are a lot of stories of ball players that, effort got them by, but they had a decent amount of talent to begin with. You got to have a certain amount of talent to get there. There are, Michael Jordan didn't make teams that he tried out for. So what did he do? His family's calling him in at 10:30 at night. When he was in high school, he's out on the concrete pad shooting baskets. He's been shooting baskets for 5 or 6 hours a day. He wasn't the most talented, but he had talent. But he had even more so, he had determination. And if you follow him through his career, you'll see not just talent, but you'll see huge determination. And other players knew how he got there. So they followed him. They knew he wasn't the most talented. He became the most talented. He was just determined.
Do you think that talent is something you're born with, or do you think it's something that you cultivate?
Both.
It is both?
Yeah, it's both. It's both. I mean, Al Di Meola is a guitar player. He's considered to be the fastest in the world. And I assure you, the fact that that man can play a guitar that fast, everyone who sees it just goes, how do you do that? You can't see his hands that move so fast. How do you do that? It's a talent. Now, yes, he practices 4 or 5 hours a day, and he has since he was a kid, but there's talent involved.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's a crazy thing. Do you think that, thinking about this, I've wondered why is it that I believe that hard work can do anything?
I mean, it takes both. I mean, 2 measures of determination and 1 measure of talent will beat 2 measures of talent and 1 measure of determination. Yeah. But you got to have talent to play.
Wow. Is there anything in your life that you don't have talent for, but you still do and enjoy, and it's an important part of you?
I usually don't stay with it.
Really?
Why would I, as a human being, want to persist in putting myself through something that I'm not very good at? Because I won't enjoy it. I'm sorry, I won't. I won't enjoy something I'm not good at. See, people who are really good at something make it look really easy, because to them it is. But yet to the next person, it would not be easy. It'd be difficult because they don't have the gift or the talent. I'm searching for my gifts and talents. I'm not I'm not trying to be great at everything. I don't have that chance.
Hmm.
If there's 100 things I could do, maybe I have talent for 8 or 10, maybe 6 if I'm lucky. I don't have talent for 90 something of them. Why would I want to pursue that? That's just burning my life up for no purpose. I mean, what is that? So like masturbation? I mean, trying and trying to be good at something that you're not good at. Isn't that just stroking yourself off?
That's fascinating. To me, I have always prided myself on becoming someone who my talent is figuring out a way to do things that I don't do well. That's something that's been obsessed with in my life.
You're you and I'm me.
Yeah, that's it.
And my way is not your way, and your way is not mine.
Absolutely.
I don't even know how I got where I got. I kept going. I used to say that is to my even competitors I'd meet them. I said, when you guys are out partying, I'll be in the radio station working. I will work you in the dirt. You will not outwork me. You won't. So there's a work ethic in there too. When everybody else was 20, 21, 22 years old, drinking and partying, I didn't. I'm working 3 jobs. I'm trying to get ahead.
Wow. So, broadcast life. Do you have a family? Have you ever had a family?
Yeah, I was married 20 or so years, have a son who's 40. Some years later, married a woman 15 years younger than me. That lasted a little while, a few years. And I've been single ever since. I'm not close to any of my family except my son and my brother. I mean, most of my family are people I've accumulated along the way. My growing up was such that my family I don't necessarily share blood with. And they're the people who treat me like family, and I treat them like family.
It's beautiful. I love that. It reminds me, I once learned that you've heard the phrase or the kind of mantra, blood is thicker than water.
Bullshit.
You know what's crazy?
What?
I heard that what it actually is that the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. Isn't that something?
Wow, I never heard that.
Yeah.
That's very insightful.
I thought you'd like that.
Yeah,
I heard that and I said, wow, that is fascinating to me.
If I'd have believed that, I'd be in rural Alabama. I don't know what I would be like. All I knew was growing up is I saw things on television. I saw there were places where kids had sidewalks to ride bicycles on and things like that. I wanted to go to that world. I want to go be a city boy. I have no desire to live in the country.
What's your favorite place besides where we're at now that you have lived?
What first came to mind is a place I visited a lot. I've been there 15 times, which would see week to 2 weeks at a time. I guess you could say I almost lived there. It's Amsterdam, Holland. It's the most beautiful, scenic, artistic, inspiring place I have ever been in my life. I call it going to get my brain scrubbed. I go there and it's like stepping into a different world. I'm gone from here. Everything's a little different. I'm comfortable because everyone speaks English there. So I'm very comfortable, but it's different. There's 750,000 people in Amsterdam and 1 million bicycles. So they ride bicycles. You're more apt to get run over by a bike than by a car. Everything is small and compact. People don't accumulate stuff like we do here. It's not unusual to see a lady and these are not 10 speeds. They're not the bikes we ride. These are industrial strength, 1 gear. You could run over them probably and they'll still keep going. I don't know what the brand is, but she's on her bike. She's pedaling. The saddlebags on the side are full of groceries. There's one kid sitting up here facing her and another one behind her, and she's been out doing the shopping. She's out doing her errands. I find it to be a magical place. I don't know why exactly. It's damp in the wintertime. It's cold. It's on the North Sea. Holland's built on a swamp, so I don't know what all that is. It's the city. The age, the buildings, all the canal houses are mostly 1400s, and they're still there. I've stayed in a number of them. Some of them are so old they're starting to list to one side, but they prop them up and keep them going. The Van Gogh Museum is there. Van Gogh was from Holland. So was Rembrandt, and I love the art in the Rijksmuseum, the Van Gogh Museum. There's a modern museum. The Anne Frank house is there. I can just go down the list. And there's an area of town called the Jordan, which is all sorts of little galleries. You know, they may only represent 2 or 3 artists, but you can go into a place that's not much bigger than this room, if that large, and look at the art. You can spend a whole day doing that. Do I go to the red light district? No, I don't care about that.
Is that a real thing?
It's real. Oh yeah, trust me, it's real.
I believe you.
You can. There's parts. They pose in the window. They won't make eye contact, but they pose in the window. You're not supposed to take a picture, and there's something for everybody. You know, there's short ones, tall ones. You like 25-year-olds. You like 65. They're all there. You know, whatever turns your crank. It's there.
Wow.
I mean, I've walked through that area of town a few times, but it's not my thing.
Wow.
Now the coffee shops were. They call them coffee shops, brown cafes. I mean, I assure you, the first time 25 years ago, I walked into one of these and, I went to the counter and got myself hot chocolate, and I went to the other counter and bought hash or pot and went back to my table and sat there and had a wonderful old time. Or restaurants where you go and order your food and then you go roll yourself a joint and, you're stoned by the time the food comes. It's not legal, but they consider it a soft drug. They don't enforce it. And so
It's not legal?
Not completely.
So all the stories that I hear about going to Amsterdam, it's actually technically illegal.
Yes. Yeah, they just look at it. They don't think they believe that people who smoke pot don't hurt anybody. I had a bouncer explain it to me one time. We were actually sitting in a coffee shop and struck up a conversation, and he works as a bouncer. He said, the Brits come over and drink. He said, in those places, we need 3 and 4 bouncers. He said, do you see any bouncers in a coffee shop? He said, people who smoke pot don't cause trouble.
Yeah. I've never seen an angry person.
You won't.
It's impossible. That'd be very strange.
So you asked me the place. I don't know why that place fits me. I get to step away from this life. Not completely, but just enough. Just enough. The grocery stores over there blow my mind. They're well stocked, but they're much smaller than here. And they have 2 brands of things, not 24 or 50 like we do. Their food is fresher. It's not as processed. It's a different life. It's very different than here. People who've only spent time in America do not realize how different life is in other places. They think, they travel to Europe or South America. They want everything to be like Holiday Inn. They want it to be like home. Well, why did you go? Why don't you just stay home? The real world out there is not like here, although we're slowly infecting the world.
That is an interesting thing to say because, as you know, I have been on the road for almost 7 months now, staying with people across America. And it is eerily true that I have been in 25 of the 50 United States, in at least 3 cities of all of those places. And the people are all different and unique and exciting. And there's some local shops, and they're different and unique and exciting. And at the same time, I have never had to go for more than 15 minutes to go to Planet Fitness. I've seen more McDonald's than anything else, that I've seen on the road. And what you're saying is true. The cities are very much just replica after replica. Downtowns are unique, which is very cool, but the suburbs, they're all the same.
Yeah, and the world is trying to copy us.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. It's a deeper question than I can answer. They see something that we have that they want. The problem is they really don't see the full picture. They see how we project ourselves to be. They do not see how we really are.
Now that's interesting. When you say that, do you feel like there's a pressure in America to project anything specific?
Yeah, you're supposed to believe in the American dream.
What do you think? What do you think we're supposed to believe in?
I don't know, because the American dream is different for each person. It's not one thing. It doesn't exist. It's a myth. It's something that's been created to try to assemble us all under. But people want a piece of that. It's what you'll hear. They immigrate to live the American dream.
It's exactly what I hear from immigrants.
But there's a wave now. They're going home. They're going back. They found out it's not here, or they don't like what came with it. And some are going back to where they came from.
So it's interesting that you say that. One thing I've been trying to figure out as I talk to people across the U.S. is what the American story is. And I'm currently working through that, but what I've come to find out is that there is no American story.
No, we're a bunch of European colonizers primarily. But, you know, I mean, I'm getting into my politics, but we basically raped and pillaged and took the land. That's what we did, and claimed it as ours.
When you think, so like, with having that be the history that you feel,
I know
is
it's
the
true.
history,
I know it's
right?
true. Just read your history.
What does that do to you? Or what does that do in terms of your life narrative, your life story? Does that affect your life story?
Sure, it makes me sad. I mean, what's really sad is people don't know their history. I mean, I saw a piece, this was probably a year ago, where they've been in New York, Chicago, and they're stopping people who are 20 and 30 something and asking them questions. What a bunch of idiots we are. You ask someone when the Civil War is, they said the 60s. You ask them, did World War I or World War II come first, and they're confused. They don't know. We don't know our history. We don't know how we got here. We really don't. Americans generally were so self-absorbed, we really have no idea of our history. And if you get into the history of the world, they know even less. I mean, you know, you want to tell people sometimes, okay, you've heard about the Renaissance, the European Renaissance, the golden age of art and medicine and all that. Folks, you want to know what caused that? It's called the plague. Prior to the plague that killed 40% of the people in Europe, there wasn't enough food, there wasn't enough work, there wasn't enough housing. Well, we killed off 40% of the people, and they created the Golden Age. That happened again about 500 AD. It's the end of the Roman Empire. What ended the Roman Empire? Same thing. Is it takes these kind of calamities before, you know, they create some opportunity for us to move forward. Isn't that a heck of a thing? That's how we do it.
Well, I mean, this leads us into hypnotherapy. And, you know, it's interesting, at least it does me, because one thing that I've noticed is that the way the brain works, as far as I can tell as a psychologist, is through contrast. And so at the macro level, it's when you have terrible tragedy or a terrible, awful thing that happens, anything in contrast is great. And what we also know in psychology is that when you feel great, you do great. Broaden and build. So when you feel great, a lot of the times, especially following tragedy, you're creative and you build and you engage life. And so sometimes for a person, it's like an addict who hits rock bottom. It's not that when they hit that rock bottom and they hit that terrible point, the build up, it might be slow, but the momentum is usually tremendous if it's a real rock bottom. So it seems consistent what happens to the individual, what you're pointing out
So
there.
what's going to keep this country from being a few hundred-year flash in the pan? What's the tragedy or calamity that we need to be able to wake us up? You know, comfort and luxury is what we seek. Comfort and luxury doesn't teach you anything. It makes you soft and causes you to stop learning. So how do we get back on the curve? I don't have the answer to that.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I don't have the answer. I mean, this country's changed a huge amount in not my lifetime, but it was something else 10 years before I was born. And it's turned into something completely different in my lifetime.
What would you say it's turned into?
Me, mine. Yeah. Got to find myself. Yeah. What I want matters. My opinion matters. Well, everybody's opinion matters, but yours doesn't matter any more than the next person. Yeah. Well, okay, here's an example. There were people watching baseball in the 20s and 30s. How big were the stadiums? Small.
100
Not many
maybe?
people could have, well, there were a couple of thousand, New York, 2 or 3. It's all the people could have had the time off, could afford to go.
Yeah. Everybody else was working.
Yeah, everybody else was trying to get by, trying to make a living. Were amusement parks? Oh yeah, we had, New Jersey, and we had a few big cities where you could go on a Sunday and walk the boardwalk and stuff. Now we're trying to keep ourselves entertained. We're trying to get something to take our attention. So we have all these amusement parks. We have all the gladiator sports, professional sports. We have all these huge arenas because we're bored, we're not satisfied, we want something, and we're just trying to fill our time. If you don't believe that's true, look at all the media that feeds to us.
Is that really worse than not having food?
I didn't say it was worse.
Yeah, it's just a different problem.
Yeah, it causes everybody to be, you mentioned calamity pulls people together. When people are struggling, they have a tendency to pull together. When they have more than enough and they've got lots and lots of leisure time, then they separate.
Oh, you just hit something fascinating to me. I remember when COVID-19 first started
Mhm.
and people were speculating that we'd all come together as a country.
We didn't.
Well, half of our country, perhaps, I don't know the statistics for certain, but I know it's between 40 and 60%, didn't believe we were having calamity.
Mm.
So you can't, there's a big difference between what is in like 100% everybody believes this is calamity, and then people who, if you don't believe it, you don't have the reason to come together.
They couldn't see it.
Couldn't see it.
9/11.
Well, if that's what they
9/11,
believe,
they could see.
yeah, I think that's a good point.
They could, World War II, they could see.
I think that's a very good point.
They couldn't see COVID.
You can't see disease at all. And you can't even tell that how many people, when they get sick, they think they have allergies. It's the immediate response that half the people will say, oh, it's allergies.
It's just, I mean, this is, okay, I'm not meaning to be a pessimist, but all you got to do is track through time and how we're moving closer and closer together. There are viruses out there mutating that are waiting for us. We haven't seen anything yet of what's coming.
Are you a pessimist by nature?
No, not pessimist. I think we'll survive. I think a lot of people are going to have to die so we can. It may take that to save the planet.
Are you an optimist?
Eternally.
Subconsciously or consciously?
Consciously. I believe somehow it'll all be okay. It will be.
Huh.
I just don't know how much damage is going to get done to people and the planet for it to be okay. So, it's all going to be okay.
I think that's a beautiful sentiment, and I certainly hope it's true. What made you decide to become a hypnotherapist after you retired from broadcasting?
Hypnotized someone at band camp when I was 14. I always wanted to do it. It was just something stuck inside me that said, you ought to do that. You ought to pursue that. Of course, I grew up in a time when hypnotherapy was bark like a dog and quack like a duck. It had no cred. There's credibility wasn't there. That's changed over time. I mean, hypnotherapy has a medical billing code, even though the insurance companies won't pay for it. They'll allow people who have health spending accounts to use that money to pay for it, which is their own money. But the insurance company, it's pre-tax, and the insurance companies administer it. It's come more into its own, and I don't know. I'm not sure why I joined up at a time where it was meaningful to join up. If I had tried to do it when I was, 1975, when I was 24 years old, nobody would have taken me seriously.
Have you ever been hypnotized?
Yes, many times.
What would you say the most beneficial experience you've had has been with?
Was in class. You're going to school. Different people are going up for different things. I mean, they're some of the instructors that are hypnotherapists. They're hypnotizing people, and the rest of the class is watching, and then you're discussing it afterwards and all that. And if most of us waited, I waited until they got to the family stuff. And I know 2 of us volunteered at the same time, and the coin is actually taped on a Post-it note on my bulletin board, and there I won the toss. And it was about making peace with my family, my father to a point, and my mother. Yeah, it was cathartic. I have a tattoo on my right arm that it was that cathartic.
Wow. Did you find peace?
Some more of it. Will I ever completely find peace? No. I'm restless. What's next? What am I going to learn next? Did I find a good measure of it? Yes. Yeah, I did.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. And it was sudden, all of a sudden.
What do you think, I know this is important to you, in your life story, how important is hypnosis?
It's what I do now. It's another one of the very important things in my life, but many things have been. Music is probably the single most important thing to me. That's what, since I was little, tiny, it's still what pulls at my heart. I could always find a song. For whatever I was feeling, the way I grew up, I could always find a song that expressed how I felt. There's an old song called Fire and Rain by James Taylor. At one point, when I was 18 years old, that was my life. It was almost like he wrote every word of that. I could relate to it. Where I couldn't articulate my feelings, I could find a song that would articulate my feelings, both good and bad. And so music has been a constant all the way through, but that's what led me to broadcasting. I was a good enough musician, so I played other people's music. And everything else, here's one thing, is I learned if you stay in a single profession long term, you will start to get bored because it's the same thing over and over. And I did what I've since coached other people to do, is don't expect your work to get you off for the rest of your life. That's an awful lot to lay on a profession.
Mm-hmm.
Let your work take you to things outside of work that excite you. And then bring that to work and bore everybody like I did when I was learning to fly. I'm just cloud nine because I'm flying. I'm telling people about flying. You know, I got certified to build amateur rockets when my son was growing up. I mean, I would drive 800 miles to be able to legally launch these big rockets that I built and then blow myself up with. That's part of something I got excited about because I got to share it with my boy. Flying airplanes I did, making electronic music I did, my photography studio I did. Those are not things I did full time. Those are interests that I indulged myself so I could stay interested in my profession, interested in life. Because I don't care what you do. Psychology, I assure you, after 30, 40 years, it won't get you off like it does now. You just can't. It can't.
I'll come back to you in 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, well, I may be in ghost form by then, but no,
I'll find you.
I've watched people do it over and over and over. You have to have other things feeding into your excitement of life.
Yeah, you're right. Otherwise, you get satiated. That's what the brain does. It gets satiated. I can't do. For me, what I've done is I've allowed myself to become interdisciplinary within psychology, and so I can jump from studying deep clinical psychology to studying basic persuasion to studying organizational psychology. Sure. And they're all different.
But you will at some point need other things to keep that alive. You'll bring out other sources, and it may be like I flew airplanes or making music. You will find your craft there too, and there'll be things you'll bring from that into your craft that make you better at what you're doing because it broadens, it makes you deeper, it makes you look higher, it makes you look lower. You see things you wouldn't see ordinarily.
Like being a rapper.
Yeah.
That could be it.
Who's to stop you?
You could you could get me on the radio, right?
Yeah, well.
If I'm really good.
Yeah, radio stations the people on the air haven't played what they wanted to since about 1975. It's all pre-programmed, tested, homogenized, and stuck on the radio. I was there. I know it was. Because radio stations in those, commercial radio was all about playing the same 300-400 songs over and over and over. Why? Because when somebody turns it on, they want to hear one of the hits that they like, they can sing along with. They turn the radio off half hour later, don't listen again till the next day, but they want to hear hits. You can't be taking music fans, people who really like music, will never be pleased by radio. Wow. Now, streaming can, because you can customize the experience. If you like Black Sabbath into, Frank Sinatra into some new age music, into trance music, you can have the mix. But radio stations can't do that because there's an audience of one that wants to hear that.
Wow. Okay. Let me ask you this. We'll round some things out here. What's a moment in life that you really regret? And I don't mean regret as like something that you haven't let go of.
I broke my second wife's heart. I'll regret that the rest of my life. I probably still am in love with her. It's been 20 years. It kept me to myself so I wouldn't go that far with someone else because I'm, even with all my recovery, fearful that I might do something like that again. Loved her, married her. Things weren't going real well. She's sleeping in a separate bedroom. Realtor comes along who has an impotent husband. I slept with her. I felt bad. I admitted it, and I got divorced. She divorced me. She saw that as unforgivable. And that's it. That's the one. That's the one. You can't go back and undo stuff. And let me finish that story. She was so angry at me. I mean, she said things that I'm sure she regrets, like you should just go kill yourself. You'll wish you were dead by the time I'm done with you. Because she was dragging me through, for money and all that. When I went to rehab, and it wasn't for substance, it was for bad childhood and depression and stuff, she came for family week with my brother, and she couldn't say a kind word to me at all. She was seething mad at me. Well, she sat through the classes for 3 days, and she wrote me the most beautiful letter. It's on a copy of it's on my bulletin board in there, that basically says, now I get it. I understand. I understand why you were just withdrawn at times. You were sad. And she said, I'm so sorry that I could not draw you out and get you to talk to me and get you to, somehow I could help you. She said, I forgive you for what happened. And I will always love you, but I cannot be with you. When I got home for 14 months afterwards, we did something about once a week. I'm still hoping we'll get back together. Divorce isn't quite final. We'd go to the movies, we'd go out and eat, and I'm doing better. And one night she's saying goodbye at the back door, kind of give me the shoulder hug, one of those. And she looked up at me and she said, I'm really proud of you. You have completely turned your life around. She said, now I've got to get on with mine. I cannot see you anymore. And that was that. So here's what I learned from her. That was real love, real love. And what I learned is you can fuck it up in just a few hours. You can run off the love of your life just by not using your head. I did. And so now it's 2 decades later. And here I am. I don't live in regret. I don't. I learned to be grateful for the worst things that happened to me. I learned to be grateful for my evil stepfather. I learned to be grateful about what I learned from it. I learned to be grateful to Amy. I mean, one of the main things I learned is that being faithful was not for her. What I was missing is being faithful for me. It's about me being confident enough, strong enough, knowing what I want enough to do that. It wasn't something I was giving to her. I knew that. That's what I learned. I thought it was, and I was mad at her. So I screwed everything up.
I can imagine.
You asked, so there you go.
No, I appreciate it. And I think that for me, I really think it's important for people to connect with what they regret in exactly how you said it. Connect the lesson. Integrate that into a lesson for life and always know what you want less of in your life. To me, regrets are just things you want less of, moments you want less of in your life.
That's a good way of looking at it.
And that was powerful. I appreciate you sharing that. I've been on the other side. I've been cheated on. And I think it's because I've been cheated on that I could never cheat on someone. And it happened early in life. I don't know if I didn't have that experience, where I'd be at with that, but I remember it. And it really did fundamentally change my life in a good way now. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. What's a moment of success in your life? What is the moment you are most proud of in your life?
That's very difficult. Watching my son walk for his first master's degree. I never got that far. I thought I was going to when I was younger. And to have watched him not just do the master's, to go on for the first doctorate and then work for the second doctorate. I'm very proud of my son. Because that's what you always want for your kids, to get to do what you didn't do, to take what you did, to take it further. To know that they're going to be okay without you. And that's the kind of things parents say, at least what I think they should say. That's it. Wow. It's not about me.
That's beautiful. You saying that gives me a lot of hope. My grandfather, he passed away when I was a freshman in high school, but his life mission was to see me graduate high school because he wanted to make sure I did that, because he wanted to make sure I could have a decent life.
Yeah.
And every single time I've graduated from high school to bachelor's to master's, and in 2 years or a year or two, whenever I finish up my dissertation, it'll be a PhD.
Right.
I think about how it would have just shocked him in that way. He'd been so proud. And hearing it from the other end, how you feel towards your son, makes me feel, I hope your son feels that same feeling I have right now.
I hope so. That's who I was talking to tonight when you guys came in.
It's beautiful. I guess I'll end by asking you, with all the life lessons that you've had, what is a core value or life lesson that you aspire to live your life by?
We talked about it last night. You don't know what you don't know. If you'll realize that, it keeps you open. As we learn more, we have this tendency to think we know. We don't. Of what could be known about any subject or everything else there, anything else out there, all we can know is a fraction of what's out there. You don't know what you don't know. It's kind of like we talk a lot these days. Stupid people don't know they're stupid. It's the same thing. You don't know what you don't know.
I love that you said that. James, it's been a pleasure. You're a beautiful person.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed it.